Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Life Talks. Today I have Justin Copeland on. He's the founder and creator of Navigating the Intentional Life blog and podcast, and creator of the Cigar Room, which is just a recent, thing that you created. I want to dive into that with you. It's an Air Force vet fighting for present fathers and part of the masculinity movement. Justin, thanks for joining me, brother.
Yeah, Michael, man, I appreciate it. I was excited to sit down with you this morning and chop this shit up. I'm ready.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe we could just start with, your podcast and the work that you're doing, the Intentional Life blog podcast.
Yeah,
so
man.
If you could just go into what you're doing with that.
So it's funny because you said the masculinity movement, and I always kind of get a chuckle whenever I say something about that or when somebody brings it up, because I started Navigating the Intentional Life originally with just the blog back in February 2021. And from that, I knew I wanted to do the blog. The blog was kind of the feelers to what people would think if I started sharing this story and this message that I was trying to get out. And then I went to the podcast. And that was something that was supposed to be more about, people that take risk, people that try, people that put themselves out there into a certain arena and chase a passion. What's the difference between somebody that can do that and the majority of the masses that don't, that sit back, they play it safe, they get the good accounting job, and they never really reach their full potential of the passions that they actually have. And that's what it started out as. But as it started to go on, and I met guys like Zach Small and the Phil Fosters of the world, it started to shift in this like, hey, there's guys out there, myself included, that are really, really looking for these outlets and these groups of men that go, hey, I don't want to be boring, man. Like I don't accept the dad bod mentality, right? And I say mentality there because it's not necessarily just about the physical mentality. And that's where I started to go, okay, I get this, I'm into this. Overall, it's Navigating the Intentional Life is still there. Majority of my listeners are men, and that's fine. I love that, but it's really to get people to look and to think about, okay, where I'm at right now doesn't mean it's where I have to be 5 years from now. And so I bring guys on that, and I've had one female on so far, but my son was on there as well. But, people that have taken the chances, they put themselves out there, they've done the hard work, and it's an opportunity for the listeners to see where they started from, to hear the struggles that they went through to get to from where they were to what they might see on their social media or on the YouTube and those things. And so that part of it, I'm really proud of, because it's literally reignited friendships that I haven't had or haven't spoken to in 20 plus years. It has opened up new friendships, and the opportunities for new friendships with people that I would have never have known otherwise, like yourself and Redmond and Anthony Miglioroni. And, it's been an amazing journey. And I know we're going to get into the fact that it's like, I wouldn't be here had I just sat back and just not started, I just took the step and went. And so that's really the crux and the foundation of Navigating the Intentional Life.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I've had great conversations too with Zach, Anthony, Redmond, and look forward to this conversation with you and future conversations as well. You mentioned the dad bod mentality. I actually had somebody on recently, Matt Izzo. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's on Twitter. Great stuff he puts out. But it's like that's. Before we started this call, we talked a little bit about, fear. And that's something that, you're going to be talking about in Twitter spaces. But, the dad bod mentality, it's really profound, because as we were talking in the podcast, it's like people can lose weight. And that's what Matt did. He lost 75 pounds, put it back on, lost it again. And that gaining that weight twice. A lot of people going to the gym or working out, or this idea of being a macho man, right? Like you can front for a little bit, but eventually life's going to punch you in the face, where you're not going to be, unless you have that deep understanding of like your core identity, which is, the value structure, and not like, I'm going to fake it till I make it. Although that might be a piece of it, maybe if you could dive into I asked Zach this, one of the first conversations, our first call, what does it mean to be a man to you? Because everyone has a different meaning, right? And so I love that question, because a lot of people just dismiss it, or a lot of people just give these surface level answers, but occasionally we hit that core point that like lights up, it lights up things in people's minds, myself too, right? So what is it to be a man to you?
The answer to that question, as you said already, is different for everybody else. But I think I take a different stance, even from the Zachs and the Anthonys and these guys out there that are doing their thing and are well established, because I'm somebody that, as a guy, I believe that a real man understands what it means to be vulnerable. A real man understands it's not just about, do I provide, do I put food on the table, but is able to tap into and understand the emotional aspects of what makes us human. Because if you don't have that under control, you're going to have vices. You're going to be an alcoholic. You're going to be yelling at your family. You're going to be out getting in bar fights. You're going to have something, because you're not facing what's truly here. So the first step part of being a man is understanding yourself. I know that probably sounds cliche, but it's something none of us fucking do enough. And I can sit back and say, oh, I don't give a shit about what you think and what you think. And I think that's the biggest lies that we tell ourselves when we try to promote to other people, is that, like, I don't really care. The second one is like, man, as I pound my chest alpha male, I'm not afraid of shit. I'll fight you. I'll fight the dog. I don't care. Right. Because it goes back to step one of I don't give a crap. Those are both lies. Right. You're going to, as a man, you're going to be afraid. You're going to be afraid of whether or not you're doing well enough for your wife, for your children, for your friends, for yourself. Right. You're going to be afraid that you're not going to reach that full potential of yourself, or you're going to be afraid that you never take that step. Among all of the external fears that you're going to have, the first one is that internal, because, I can sit back and say, I don't give a crap, but that's a concept of fear, right? I want to pretend, I want to promote that to you so that you think I'm something that I'm not. The reality is, as a man, that what you have to understand, what makes us men, is that we have a core understanding of who we are, and from there, what our foundation is. And what our foundation is what we live off of. That's where we start to build legacy from, right? You don't build a house without leveling the ground first and creating a good foundation. Then you start to put up the walls, right? Then you start to build from there up. And as men, that's our responsibility. That's what makes a man, is, do you follow those core values, or are able to construct those core values that not only make you good for your family, because that's your legacy, that's your living legacy, but then also, what are you doing for the other people around you? And to me, that's where you go. If you're really dialed in and you're really taking it serious, as far as my heart is, I'm following my code, then you don't have to say, I don't give a shit, because you're going to be too focused to listen to the other noise, right? Because you're dialed in. And to me, that's where it really starts, is the core of being a man.
Yeah, there's two things that stood out there for me. One is, the foundation and your core, your code. For the longest time, I want to dive into this a little further in the podcast, but I do want to dive into faith, because I think that is one of the most profound things of also being a man, being a human being. What that really means in such a dogmatic world where things, people want to force their ideas on you. But the foundation and the core, your code, that to me, I 100% agree, because for me, I was in alignment with my own code. So, the idea of sin and things like that, when I would go against other people, I was really going against myself. And I knew that on an intellectual level, but it wasn't until I started to reap, the feelings that go along with that. I'm not being the best version of myself, or, and it starts to weigh on you in the sense that it's like they say, the pain of regret weighs heavier than the pain of discipline. Man, that's such a true statement. But that was something that stand out. So 100% agree with you on that. And the second was, you were speaking about with Redmond. You said that you were going to be speaking about fear. Maybe if you could just dive into a little bit what impact that had in your life, fear, and how that has held you back, and how you've come to understand it, and how to deal with it. Because I think we all deal with a little bit of fear in our lives, and like you say, people try to pretend that, there's something they're not, but we all experience that. How do you deal with that in your life?
So I think the first part kind of goes back to what you really said with your code and your foundation. I think one, when you're solid in that and you understand that a part of your code and a part of that foundation is faith, because some of that is projected in the future, right? Like, I believe this, and so that down the line, that will result in this. It's believing in something that you have reason to believe in without necessarily seeing. And that's what faith is. It doesn't have to be some, figurative guy in the sky for people, right? For myself, I believe in God. I always have. But it is an aspect of faith that your code is built around, and so from there, once you've established that, I think there are always going to be things that scare you. I told you before we went online, I like my days and each day to have something that makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. Something that makes me doubt whether or not I can do it, or that I want to do it, or it scares me a little bit. And that's one element of fear, right? That's kind of self-doubt. That's a little insecurity. That's a little of the unknown. And that's one element of fear. We're not talking about, if a bear came burying through my door right now, that's a totally different kind of fear. That's a very prominent, real danger. But, for me, fear is something that you overcome. And for guys like me, for guys like Zach, fear is something that we handle because we go, okay, I'm going to take ownership in who the hell I am, and let's go. And so we turn it just like that. So it goes from, yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable, to let's get the work done. Let's get into it. Right. And for me and for guys like that, it's literally just taking ownership. And that was something that Zach and I spoke about with Anthony on their spaces the other day was, look, I'm not scared, because I just go, all right, screw it. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And I think for guys like myself and him and some of these others, it literally is, what's the worst outcome? Screw that. I'm not worried about that minuscule outcome, because at the end of the day, I need to look at what happens if I don't do this. What do I not have now if I don't do this? And that for me really helps me compartmentalize that fear or that.
Yeah. And there was something else, because I forgot. I was trying to think, because I said there was two things, and I dove into the fear with you, but the second was that really stood out, came to me as you were speaking. And this is a Twitter post from you that I have here. I don't give a shit what anyone thinks. This is one of the biggest lies on all platforms. No matter how big someone becomes, we all care about what others think. We all want to be accepted and liked. Those who say otherwise have serious detachment issues. Bro, you hit that on the nail on the head, because, for a long time, I've dabbled with the idea of internal validation, external validation. And I think if you're solely relying on external validation, I need to be liked, that's a problem. But, and I think it's a step in the right direction when you don't need that external validation, because then you're operating on your own code, right? Because then it's like you're shining. You're not trying to be the center of attention, but you don't care if you're the center of attention, because you're shining. You're operating on your internal code, which has to come from, time reflecting on your emotional trauma or whatever it is. Kingdom of heaven is within, is the whole core of that. But what I love about how you said this, which made me really realize this, we talked about this a little bit the other day, is that we all want attention, but I think it has to come from people who are connected with their internal code, right? It's like true validation versus validation for its own sake. I say something nice to you to build up your ego versus I say something nice to you because I actually mean it, because I recognize something that I've recognized within myself, and then we can share that together. And it's like, wow, this is like, we're going to help other people. As Zach says, he said in one of our podcasts, these conversations are going to save somebody's life, right? Because when the more real our conversations, the more people are going, holy shit, that's me. These guys get it, right? Because we've done that digging within our own hearts and understood that. So shout out to you, bro, because there's a big movement of just people saying, I don't need it. And I was that way too, because I knew, like, I didn't want validation from other people just because, I see how the ego can slip in and say, I can give you a compliment, Justin, makes you feel good. I don't want that. I want to say something to you because it's real and honest, because if I can have that real relationship with you, I can tell you something that may make you piss you off, right? Because if I'm only just boosting your ego up, then it's just a feel good conversation. We're never going to say anything mean to each other, which I think is a problem in our society. Maybe you could dive into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, the validation and affirmation, I think those are two very similar, they're stepbrothers living in the same bedroom kind of a situation, because affirmation is something that I would say that I would look for from the people that are in my arena. Whether it's you, whether it's Zach, whether it's some of these guys, the Sean Whalens, these guys are pushing the metric further down every day. And so to be able to work with them, there's some affirmation there that, hey, like what my message is strong enough that they would bring me on board. So I care about that. Does that reflect who I am? And when I go to bed at night, like, do these guys like me? No. I've been fortunate enough in the process, because one of the things you said about authenticity is the difference maker in our stories. Zach is a real motherfucker. I talked to him on, the phone, and I've established a relationship with him. A lot of these guys that we've already name dropped, this is what they are day in, when the camera's on, when the recordings are on, and when the recordings are off. This is who they are. And so that affirmation is something that, I want that. I want to know that I'm doing my part. As far as the validation goes, where I think they're separate is, and all I can think about is if I walked into a room and people started clapping, like that's ego, to have that want, to have some, Karen or Chad off the street say, great stuff, Justin, I love your podcast. No, fuck you. Like I'm not looking for that. What I want is the other thing that you hit on that I think you said, Zach said, was this is meant to change and save lives.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? The other side of that for guys like myself is I've got two boys that are my, this is not my quote. This is from Matthew McConaughey off Ryan Mickler. But, I've got two living legacies. And if I've got two living legacies, and that makes me immortal. And if I'm immortal, then what the fuck do I have to be afraid of? I'm sorry with the cursing. This is, good, I got no filter. But, if that's the case, and this is true, then I should be putting every bit of my lifeblood into what it is that I'm doing. And I'm still going to have fear, but I'm going to harness that fear. I'm going to carry it, and I'm going to utilize it as fuel to say, are you better today than you were yesterday? And what you did today, where's it going to put us next month, next year, right? I go about on a 2-year type plan. I have too much ADD. I see these guys with these 5-year plans. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
But, to kind of put all that back together, when it comes to the group of people that you surround yourself with, there's that famous saying or metric, whatever you want to call it, where it's, you are the percentage of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yep.
And so when I look at that, I think, well, what am I then? What does that percentage look like for me? And you said, I want the people that can talk to me and tell me something, even if it might hurt my feelings. Absolutely. Because if I don't, my ego could run a long way down the field. And what good is that going to do for anybody? I put a tweet up the other day about, I've got people that have no problem with calling me a pussy when I'm being one. That's self-check, man. That's the kind of stuff that you want to have. If that's not your circle, you don't have a circle, period.
Yeah. And when you got those high moments in your life, have your friends to be able to humble you, but then also when you're in those humble moments that they build you up, remember to make you realize, like, because that's that mind wants to, pull us down. Are you familiar with David Goggins?
I am.
Yeah. So like how he has, it's the cookie jar, he calls it the cookie jar, right? To remind ourselves that how awesome we really are, but without slipping into that ego fix. Maybe if we could dive into a little bit more on faith. I know you do a lot of work with Redmond. I think it's awesome. I think his journey on faith is really good too. We went in depth about it. Maybe if you could share, because I feel like I relate to you a lot, just on our conversations. For me, I'll share,
You've definitely got a budding bromance happening.
For sure, bro. But like for me, when I would go to church, it was just like I was looking at the clock, where I'm like, all right, when is this going to be over? We had 10:30, we would have snacks. So when I was a kid, it was just like I was ready. 9:30 we get there, 10:30 be done. And I was never really engaged in it because I feel like a lot of it was it's almost like Mockingbird. We're just repeating what we see in the Bible. And it was just like, to me, it didn't seem fully alive. It wasn't until I, really started digging into, well, what does this mean? And what does this mean? I started getting really hungry to understand like the core of it. Like I didn't want to just be good, right? Because like those are some of the most crazy, some of the craziest people in the world are the do-gooders, right? They're some of the worst people. So I started to see more and more of the hypocrisy. And it wasn't until I started really listening and on my own journey and just being like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And then I say now, it's like, I like the Gandhi quote. It's like, I don't like your Christian. I hate your Christians. I love your Christ, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I find myself more and more each day, just like, I love Christ. I love what he's pointing to. I don't push my view on other people, but I find myself like, even when I say that to people, it's like, I see the old version of myself where we're just like, oh God, here we go, another Bible thought. I'm like, no, that's far from it. Like, I want to understand, like the idea of the kingdom of heaven is within you. To me, it's one of the most powerful statements. It's like, it's within you. Your freedom is within you. It's not going to come from me. It's not going to come from you. It's going to come from within. When you see the world as it is, like really, like this is what allows people who, I mean, you were in the military. This is what allows people to confront death, right? If you have that freedom within, it's like, no. I'd rather die than to give in to someone who has a corrupted heart. And very few people can say that in my view. So maybe if you could share a little bit like what faith means to you and your journey and, if any of that relates to you, or is it, disagreement?
Yeah, no, faith for me has been something that's ingrained in my life and my spirit since I can remember. I came from, I grew up in Northeast Oklahoma. All right. And so, talking about Bible Belt and Tornado Alley, right? Those were the two prominent things in my life that I can remember from an early age. And so, growing up in church was something that it really gave me a foundation of moral code. And I want to touch on that real quick, because I think a lot of non-believers, they go, well, this is a fairy tale story that you're following, that you believe in, that you think, you're going to live forever after you die. I'm like, okay, you can look at it that way. And that's your prerogative. I don't agree with it. And I'll touch on that too. But, if nothing else, it's a code on how you're supposed to treat people and how you should look at yourself and self-check your interactions with the society around you, right? Don't cheat on your wife. Don't beat your wife. Don't lie to your neighbor, right? Don't steal. We obviously go, well, don't kill somebody, right? These are simple, fundamental aspects of what being a quote unquote good person is. And so I look at it there as it was a great first layer for me growing up. Not only that, the people around me, hardworking salt of the earth. I don't care what people think about Oklahoma. And I lived out on the East Coast, which I know is where you're at. And I don't know if they teach geography out there, but I got a lot of funny questions and we can talk about that later. But, these people were simple, quote unquote simple. But at the same, I say that, I don't mean it like dumb. I mean, they wanted a simple life where they were wrapped around family and their faith. And I don't see anything wrong with that, right? So that was my first experiences kind of growing up with church. From there, I had years where if you had asked me when I was in my late teens into my early 20s, if I was a Christian, I would have said no. Because Christian for me, what I understand about it is it's you are living to be Christ-like. I mean, none of us are ever going to be perfect. That's obvious. One of the things that I look at when it comes to Christianity is we're not perfect, we're forgiven. Right? Jesus atoned for those sins. So that for me growing up was a big element of it. And I wanted to walk that walk. And if I wasn't, I didn't want to tell people that I was, because the hypocrisy in religion is something that runs and makes people scatter like cockroaches, because you go, oh, well, you're telling me I'm going to go to hell. But literally last weekend, I saw you making out with some chick at the bar that, oh, by the by, was not your wife.
Hypocrites.
Right. It makes people run.
And that's what Christ fought against. He would be the guy that would walk in the middle of the church and be like, you're full of it. He would confront. I spoke about this with Jerry. We had such a great conversation. He was a man's man. There's this idea that's hippie version of Jesus, which is nice, right? Like, I got a hippie side of me, but the man's man is the one who points out the hypocrites. And you start with yourself. Yeah. That's where I started. Wow, Mike, you're so full of shit, dude. You're so full of shit here, and here.
That's why I said, back in my early 20s, if you'd asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said no, because the last thing I want to do is for you to look at my life and how I was living and think that I'm still going to say, yeah, no, I'm a Christian, which at the time, like I got my line of thinking.
Yeah.
And maybe I didn't turn people away, but I definitely sure as shit wasn't helping people find their way. But, from there, obviously, I started to grow, I got into the military, and that was a big turning point for me, is when I got into the military, because there were so many guys in there and you're going through all these hard things, and, it's not an easy path. And so you do tend to lean on faith. You gotta have faith in something, right? And some of it is that mortality, right? You start to realize like, hey, what I volunteered to do could end up with me 6 feet under. Lights go out and the lights are out, like that's a scary thought. And you go, oh, this is real now. Like, I'm not just out with my buddies on a weekend having a good time. I mean, we're doing some things, and so you had that faith was ever prominent. And, as I've jumped into this journey with navigating the intentional life, I've had 3 or 4 pastors or youth pastors or people that are very involved in their churches on the podcast, because that's part of my journey. That's part of who I am. Now, I didn't start it with, I'm going to have a religious talk show. That was not the intent. But I look at what they did and the choice that they made to follow Christ, and not only just to follow Christ, but to stand up on a platform and be the face of what and who people go to understand some of the most complex questions that will never be answered until we're done breathing. And so I found that fascinating. How do you have that much faith, right? How do you step through that fire and come out the other side and are still a man that will stand with his chest out and preach his code? I found that fascinating. And I still do. And I think if they can do it, I can do it. And I do feel a calling in what I'm doing now and the people that I get to work with now to say, hey, yeah, this is part of what I do. If you have questions about it, the first podcast I did with the preacher, I think I made up a commandment. It was like, thou shalt not commit tax fraud. I don't remember what I said, but it was way the fuck off. And I got called out for it by people and it was great. But I can help lead you to somebody that will. Right. And so that for me with my faith it's very important that I'm promoting it in the ways that I feel I'm meant to promote it. I'm not going to promote it like Redmond. I'm not going to promote it like some of the other people, but I am willing to have the conversation. And it does make me, who I am at my core.
Yeah, well, thank God you're not going to say it like Redmond, because you know what? You say it like Justin, I say it like Mike, and nobody can say it like each other. And that's what's so cool about it is, and I talk about this with my father a lot. It's like, we're all going to express it differently, but as you said before, right, the foundation, as long as we're built on the same foundation, right? Because people have zero foundation. And now we believe that men can be women and all this crazy stuff, right? That people aren't built on a foundation, and not that anybody, people are just lost, right? So when that foundation is built upon, then we can all express it differently. And then we could all love each other's individuality, but it's based on that same idea, that idea that we're all interconnected. Everything I do to you is going to come back to me, all that. Something I noticed, as I'm talking to you now, it's like a lot of the guys that I've had on my podcast are a lot of military guys. And it's almost like there's more connection with real faith with people who are in the military. This is just something that I'm observing. Maybe if you could dive into a little bit of like your journey in the military, what you learned, maybe a story or two, of things that, you're experiencing there, and how that ties in with your faith. Because I think a lot of the things like the discipline of waking up early, right, and doing things that suck, as you had said, right, doing those things that are uncomfortable, really develop character, really develop, I think, faith, right? Because it's like, how for you to come up with a reason to do those things that suck, I think is an idea of faith. It's like you're investing in the future of yourself. So maybe if you could talk about that connection. Is there a connection? Did you notice a connection with the military and faith, and speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the path for me to the military started because I grew up in church, and I'm speaking directly for me. And I think some of the other guys I've spoken to, they can share the same. Now there are guys that they would not agree with this, but there's two parts about it. One, my faith, I think, is what pushed me to go, you're supposed to give back. You're supposed to have a code. You're supposed to answer a call, right? You know, in church growing up, you know, there was a lot of talk about what your calling is, what God has you here to do. And so that immediately started to ingrain this thought process into me, is like, what am I doing that's bigger than myself? Now, the other side of this, and this is a thing that people can't do anything about. A lot of us that have served, whether it's in the military, whether it's first responders, firefighters, police officers, these people that do these insane things, you know, they run to the disaster instead of run from it. That's just innately a part of you. My youngest son has it, right? I can see it in him. He just, and it's a willingness to go into the dark places where the bad things play, which is a little bit of a lone survivor quote there for you. But it is a willingness to go and live in that for just a bit, you know, to stand next to the fire and be willing to get burnt, that it's just there. And you can't take that out. Even now at 40, I'm still not too old to go back in. And now in the Air Force, they may not take me, you know, some of these other branches may not take me, but, you know, fuck them. But I could go back in.
Yeah.
And I still think about it. And I was just reading a book the other day called No Ordinary Dog, about when they started bringing in these Ioneses into special forces and with the SEAL teams. And I'm reading this about buds and Indoc and the evolution stuff they'd go through in the process. And I think, oh, I could do that. And like, no, man, you get upset when your shower's too fucking cold. You're done. Like those days are gone. But that calling, the point is that calling is still there. It just gets silenced. But for the guys that serve, I notice that need to answer a call is there. So when you look at Zach, when you look at myself, you look at guys like Boyd Myers. I know I'm forgetting people, but I don't need to name everybody. You know, they've all been that. They're all a vet, and they still want to answer a fucking call. They still want to find that thing that they go, okay, I can be an example of doing something that sucks. We embrace the suck. That's a military phrase for you. Embrace the suck, then adapt and overcome, another military phrase. And that's how we want to live our fucking lives. And that's what we want to promote to the people around us. Say, look, I'm not different from you. I just answered a call, or I just stepped up to him and said, hey, I'm not too scared that I won't go do it. Because here's a side note. I went into the Air Force, so my other military friends are going to go, you're a sissy, you know, we're going to make jokes. But the night before I left for basic, I was with my then future wife to then be future ex-wife. And it was the night before I was supposed to leave. And I sat there with her. I laid in bed and she held me because I was fucking scared. My anxiety was through the roof. Looking back on it now, I don't exactly know why. I knew I wasn't going to die, but it was a massive life change.
Yeah.
And so I was scared. I went by myself. You know, a lot of guys want to go with their buddies.
When was that?
Say again.
When was that?
That was 2005 going into 2006.
Okay. So right after 2001, 9/11.
Yeah, it's several years after 9/11. You know, and so that was a big turning point in my life, really bigger than I knew at the time. Not just because I went into the military, not just because I got to do some things that were cool and some things that were not cool. It woke me back up, you know, because that woman that I was talking about, my wife, then ex-wife,
yeah,
you know, I'd gotten comfortable. I'd gotten complacent, you know, because I tried to go in right after 9/11, but when I was in high school, I broke my L5 vertebrae. And then my parents divorced. I was 18. MEPS wanted all this documentation they got to check your entire body out, inside and out. And I had a lot of paperwork that I was supposed to get, but I was also playing soccer and my friends were going off to college. And I tried to go out and I wanted to go Army or Marines, but all that documentation and all the follow-up, I kept putting it off. And then finally it came around after I'd been with her. I was like, I want to go. I can't live my life looking back going, what if, you know? And so I landed in an Air Force office, pun intended, not intentionally. There was an Army recruiting office right next to it. The recruiter at the time in the Army office had gone out to lunch or had stepped out of the office. And so I walked into the Air Force and I said to her, I said, hypothetically speaking, I'm thinking about this now. Could I possibly get in trouble for this? I don't think so. Anyway, so I was like, hypothetically speaking, say you had an injury that was pretty severe and you didn't disclose said injury in your medical, what would happen? And she said, well, hypothetically speaking, I'm assuming for a friend, not you, that if you were to get injured in that same spot and they were able to determine that that injury was pre-existing, that's a dishonorable discharge. I was like, sweet, ship shape, let's sign up. And we went from there. Didn't say anything. So, you know, we all can make excuses. That's why I think I've put a tweet up too. Like, I love the, and we all love the, I was going to, but guys, you know, because you get them all the time when people start to ask, oh, you military, you military? Oh man, and they start to share their story, right? I got a brother that did it, and so now they're proud of their brother, and that's great. But it's always the I was going to, but, and I look at that and go, I could have gotten in 01. I'm thankful that I didn't. I could have gotten in 02. I'm thankful that I didn't. I'm thankful for when I went in. But I didn't make excuses. You know, I literally lied to essentially skirt a lot of extra paperwork and went in knowing that, oh shit, if I get hurt, I could get in a lot of trouble, you know, but I did it anyway. And obviously here I sit and we're fine. And I didn't re-break my back. So, you know, it worked out. But to me, that was a big turning point in my life. Like, I'm not going to make excuses. If I were to have a book written about me right now, I want somebody to actually be interested in reading it. Right? Not just my family, but if you were to sit down and you didn't know me, would you read my fucking book? And that's kind of how I look at my life and always have.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. I think of Joe Rogan. It's like, if you're the, you know, be the hero of your movie, right? Like, you know, but I think I heard a really good quote. I forgot who it was, but I actually, no, I do. It was Eric Weinstein. This really stood out to me so good. And it ties to you, you know, breaking the rules, right? If you're going to break the rules in a way that makes people love you. I love that because, you know, going into our validation thing before, you don't do it just to, you know, get the validation, right? That just to make people love you, but it's the intention behind it. Here you are joining the military, right? You're trying to be the best version of yourself. It's not like, you know, you're doing something to, you're trying to be the best version. You're trying to, you know, you're trying to do something noble, joining the military, you know, serving your country. So, you know, and that's something I think about now where we have so many rules, so many laws, so many regulations. I think when you break the rules in a way that you do it for your highest purpose, look at Christ. Christ broke some rules, didn't he? You know, so, and look what happened. So, but I think when you break the rules for your highest path, you don't even think twice about it. What happened after you went through that? So now you signed up, you're in the military. What are the things that you learned? What are some of maybe some challenges that hit you? And also, how do you balance the difference? Because I relate to you in the sense of like, let's go, let's hit the gym, let's push, right? Let's break through those barriers. But then other times where I'm like, I'm burnt out. I'm like, bro, like I'm pushing myself way too much. And it's like, how do you find that balance? Because I realize that, you know, when I take that rest or I meditate or whatever, I have so much more power to get back into the arena. And if it just all go, how do you find that balance for you? And also, you know, pushing through, you know, once you were in the military, you know, your experience there.
So I think without it being directly said, what you learn is control in chaos. And that's control in chaos, right? Because it's, you know, when you go from basic through your tech school and then you actually get out into your job, you know, it's go, you know, and there are those times where it's go, and then you have to hurry up and wait, you know, and so you have a lot of time to kind of sit and reflect. And for me, you have to know your why I went into the military, or why I have my podcast, or why, you know, you do what you do is going to be different And so, you know, every guy that joined the military had a different reason for why they joined. You know, maybe it was a family tradition that they're carrying on. You know, their dad was, their granddad was, their great granddad was, and so they're carrying that on. For me, you know, there was quite a few whys. What I also started to understand too was during my time in the military is that you have to accept that your why is going to change. That's why I don't do more than a 2-year plan, because we evolve as people, right? Our likes are gonna change. You know, in high school, I was a huge Nirvana fan. Now I can hardly stand to listen to it, right? And I thought, no, I'm going to be listening to Nirvana until I'm 97 years old, still rocking out in grunge. It's not the case.
It's funny you say that, just as a side note, just to make you laugh. When I was a kid, I remember watching cartoons. I'm like, I don't ever want to become an adult where I don't like cartoons. And it's so fun. I always remember myself thinking that. It's like, now it's like cartoons are a joke, right? But I always remember thinking that same thing, which is like, you know, I always want to be able to like cartoons.
I still love cartoons and I'm 40 years old, right? Like, I mean, obviously they've changed. Like I still like watching Disney every now and again with the dudes, but
yeah, old school Disney, right?
Oh yeah, dude. I think that's why we are the generation that we are, because we grew up with a Disney that was trying to fuck us up. You know what I mean? Like look at Bambi, look at Land Before Time, and all those movies where like the parents die and the kids are, the offspring are alone. Like that's what we grew up with. That's what I grew up with. But that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, sure.
You know, again, kind of back to that point though, is like you got to understand your why, and you got to understand that your why is going to change. And that's okay. And I think a lot of people are so confused by that, because there's a lot of really, I mean, you know, hot button is, you know, there's so much misinformation about, you know, COVID and all these things in the media today. And it's like, no, there's just a bunch of fucking misinformation in life. Yep. And people will believe it and buy into it for a lot of different reasons. But it's like, you need to understand that it's okay to adapt. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm really passionate about music, and then achieve that level and go, I don't really like it anymore. I want to go brew beer for a living. And I say that not just as like, that's what came to my head. I mean, my good buddy, Aaron Inkrot, who I grew up with in Oklahoma, he did that. He literally pursued and achieved most of what he wanted to achieve within music. And not long after he was into it, not long after he put all this time and years of work, he woke up one day and was like, I really like beer. Not like he's an alcoholic, but he's like, what if I made my own? And now he's the head brewmaster at one of the largest brewery companies here in Texas. That's my friend. I get to call him friend. You know, but he understands and has always gotten it, that it's okay for your passion to change. It's okay for your why to change. And you have to roll with it. And the ones that continue to try to fight that are the ones that they just bog down in depression and all that. The last thing I'll say on that, because I wanted to hit on this because it's one of my favorites, is the people that say, you know, when you do what you're passionate about, you'll never work another day in your life. It's like, bitch, shut up. People that say that have never done, right? That's just something that's cute that makes them feel good. Like, oh, one day, if I actually do what I say I'm passionate about, it's just going to be easy street from now until I pass on.
Yeah.
No. You will work harder than you've ever worked in your life. And guess what? You'll still fucking hate it at times. You'll still not want to do it at times. And people think, well, if I don't want to do something, then it must not be right. Like if I don't want to love my wife today, it must not be a good relationship. If I don't want to go to my job today, it must not be the right job for me. And it's because of little stupid ass comments and statements and quotes like, if you're passionate and you're doing it, you never work. That's bullshit. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked in your life.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day. And I think that for me, I noticed when I've started to grow into truth, like I start to see the world more as it is versus my own projections and how I've learned, you start to see paradoxes, because I actually agree with you and I don't agree with you at the same time. Because and I think to add, and this is where context comes in, right? Because I think you're 100% right in the sense that I think that's starting out. I think when you start out, you're not going to see it, right? You have a podcast. For me, I have a podcast. I don't have a lot of followers right now, but I know all these conversations that I'm having are awesome. They're helping people. They're adding value to people. They're adding value to me. I love these conversations. I'm going to have a productive day now after I get off the phone with you. So when I'm focused in on that, then everything else, I get into a flow state, but I'm able to work, like I'm putting in the hours of doing things right now to do it and keep doing. I'm not seeing it. So in that's where I agree. But I think at a certain point you get into flow. And I think I gave this example last time when we were talking off video. It's like Michael Jordan, where it's like you have to drill, you have to like, he loved basketball. He had to show up every single day. Before he was Michael Jordan, he had to do layups, he had to do drills, he had to do things that he was playing a game when he was sick. He's doing the hard work every single, but at a certain point, he's in flow. He's doing what he loves. But at the same time, that's the paradox of that, right? Because at first, you're gonna have to do things that suck. You're gonna have to filter out, the true feelings versus the false feelings, the feelings that want to keep you comfortable and they're not allowing you to grow. And I think the truest feeling is when you're in flow, when you love what you do, but you also have the ability to do the things that you hate at the same time.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because I kind of said that based on the conversation that we had offline, because I love that idea. So I set it up a little bit, not gonna lie. Because I thought about it after we got off the phone, after we got off that call, and I was like, hold on, Michael Jordan worked harder than anybody for the entirety of his career, right?
Yeah.
That's why he's Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about what you were talking about with flow state. And it's like, well, he didn't live in a constant state of flow.
Correct.
It was when he stepped onto the basketball court, when the game started. That was his flow. That was his flow state, right? Flow state does not happen in the practice, right? You're going to have practices where you're really on and it comes out really well. And maybe you only need one take. And I say now one take because, in lead up, and I know you and I both have talked about, like, we kind of shoot from the hip, right?
Yeah.
But there is still prep work that you've got to do. You've got to promote your podcast. You've got to promote your blog. You've got to do all these hours of behind the scene. Like, when I'm trying to put together some cutesy little Canva fucking promotional thing, I hate it. I'm not good at it, man. Like, I'm technologically just ignorant.
Yeah.
But it's part of it. It's the 100 free throws every day that Michael Jordan was doing. Yeah. It's the 100 different jump shots from each side of the basket that he was doing, from each elbow, right? Those are the things, that's the work that you can easily go, you know what, instead of doing 100 a day because I'm a little tired, I'm only going to do 50. And that's stuff that I'm talking about when I say, when you're passionate about it, you'll never work again. I think it's a dangerous statement, because true to your point is you do have to look at the context of that. Right? Like, are you going to have more days where you're like, yeah, I really love doing this? Probably.
And the only reason I point that out is because, like, I find myself trying to be more and more of a wordsmith. It's like, I go on Twitter now and I see so many, like, people that I follow who they say one thing and then it's the exact opposite and they're both true. And then I'm sitting there going like it's so crazy that it's like what was it? Einstein. It's like the ability to, if you can't explain things simply, you don't understand them well enough. And it's just like, I'll type out something, I'll be like, oh, and I'll argue my own point on there. And it's just like, you start to realize that anything you say, the exact opposite argument can be made for it. And it's just like, that's why it's also, maybe we could shift into this as well. It's got me to the point where I'm like, talk about shoot from the hip. I'm just posting everything on Twitter now, because I realized that if I was on the other side of seeing what I post, I could argue it. So I'm ready to be like, okay, you want to hit me? I've devoured my own viewpoints on certain things that I know were like people, how I'll say one thing, like nice guys finish last. This is a perfect example. Nice guys finish last. So then that invites people to say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to be an asshole. Right. So now we're like, I'm not in that box. Like, to me, I'm shifted to like, let's be good men. Like I talked with Zach. It's like, he's going to buy flowers for this girl, not so he gets something out of it, because he likes to do that. Right. He's overflowing at that point. We should be pushing more good men, but we could take the nice guy thing and then, slice that all up. So we got like 10 minutes left here. We talked about Twitter at the beginning. And you had talked about like, and I agree with you on your view on Facebook. If you could just dive into like your, what social media you use, and like, maybe just kind of share what platforms do you use, what do you not use, and yeah, just dive into that.
So I'm using the main, I guess I'll call them the main three. What are the main three to me at this point? But Twitter at Justin L. Copeland, Instagram at Justin Copeland _ and then Facebook is Justin Copeland. I mean, if you find me on Facebook, great. It's not, I don't have my Facebook open. I look at Facebook as that's for my friends and family. I still post the stuff that, because Instagram will automatically put it on Facebook. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't probably be on Facebook.
Yeah.
But I utilize those two platforms because, Twitter is something that's still relatively new to me, and trying to understand, why somebody can be like, here's my top 5 memes of the week, and it'll get 300 likes. And then somebody like you comes up with some fire and maybe only 15 people like it. I guess that's just our social media in general, but to try to understand that exposure, that's why I'm using both of those platforms. Because, when we start talking about, the calling that we have and understanding our whys, and that, how that all flows from what our foundation is, how faith is involved in that, kind of how we've answered the call to become good men and not just being nice guys.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a loud admission. I want to take my mission. Right. And that to me is what I'm utilizing these platforms for. It's just to go, hey, I have a voice, and as a man, I'm not gonna put a girder on mine. I want people to hear what I have to say. And if they don't agree with it, if they can argue it, I've had people say stuff to me, they've come at me. I've had to block a few people. But I always tell them, like, look, I respect your viewpoint. Here's the beauty in this. You can argue me all you want. You don't have to agree. And that's fucking okay. We live in a society that people have forgotten that it's okay to disagree. But I tell them, like, I've already won, man. I've already won. You have no rental space here that's free. I'm in yours because my post, my words, my thoughts made you think. It thought provoked you into the point where you actually felt the need to message me or comment on my post to say why I'm wrong. So I've already won because you had to think about why you thought I was wrong. So you've had to look at it now, and now you have to question your foundation. You have to question your belief system. It doesn't always dive that deep, but if you start to go, well, I disagree with that, that comes from somewhere, right? That comes from a belief system or a value system from somewhere within your tribe to your singularity. And I've already won, and they fucking hate it. And usually the conversations end, or I get, deleted or whatever. Like I don't typically block someone unless they're being malicious,
Yeah.
But that's how I look at that. I think that's our job here. Like you can say, yeah, there's a lot of people out there trying to do the same thing. I really tried to avoid the echo chamber because sometimes I read through these posts and I'm like, I've already read that 15 times and it's only 6:30 a.m. So I really try to avoid that. But more or less, when I post, if I'm saying something, it's because it's my story. And my story is different from yours. And it's different from Jerry's, and it's different from these guys that are fucking leading the packs. I'm just trying to do my part within the tribe. If I'm a leadership status, fantastic. If I'm a warrior status, fantastic. And I think the best, they take on all the roles. They're the guide, they're the warrior, they're the leader, right? That's how I view my social media, which I know is a weird way to go into that, but that's our tool. That's our hammer. As Sean Whalen said that his social media is like the carpenter's hammer. Yeah. And that's the way I look at it.
So final question for you. With my podcast, I want to inspire people to take action in their life. For people who are, maybe in a 9-to-5, or they're trying to transition, they're trying to figure out their why. We started a podcast, right? Just did it. What advice would you give to people who are like, yeah, but I don't know what to do. I don't know what the first step is. What would you tell people who are trying to break out of their box that they've been in? They're trying to expand, grow. Where do they start?
So first off, I would encourage the fact that you're already thinking that way is the first step, because you're looking for change by admitting that. I don't know what to do. Okay, well, slow down. I asked my youngest son one day, I said, hey, he was frustrated about an assignment. I said, how do you eat an elephant? And he goes, what? I was like, how do you eat an elephant? And he's like, you don't eat elephants. I was like, all right, I got it. Great answer. 100% spot on. You're right. But the answer to that question is one bite at a time. And it goes back to kind of the same thing I was told by a professor when I was in college. You just take the first step, right? And for me, it was, I want to do a podcast, but I don't have the microphone. I don't have a studio. I'm not Joe Rogan. So what do I do? How do I start a podcast? Man, I was doing podcasts in my closet on my phone through the Anchor app. That's how my podcasts are done. And if you go back and listen to them, I think for the majority of the shit that's out there, it doesn't sound that much different. You wouldn't be able to tell that I'm sitting in my closet. And that was one of the jokes that, I'll never forget talking to Zach the first time. And I was like, Zach, I'm just trying to come out of the closet. But that's where I started. I simplified it, right? So if you're passionate about something, start to figure out how it is that you can actually start to do it, right? If you want to be a musician, I mean, that's a big grand scheme of, big pie in the sky kind of dream. But if you want to do it, okay, great. Can you play guitar? Yes. Okay. Can you write a song? Yes. Okay. Play it and put it on your Facebook. See what people think. Understand that, look, the best way to handle these kinds of things when you start to put yourself out there is, if you want to get over the haters, don't listen to so much of the people that applaud, right? You've got to be able to believe in who you are. You got to know who you are. You've got to identify your why and understand that once you identify the what, that's where faith kicks in. Faith is the how. And that's not me. That's Jonathan Eldridge and in his book, Wild at Heart. I want to make sure that's very clear. But that for me is when I talk to people about that, it's just look at it a step at a time, keep it simple, and also understand too, and I want to do this in kind of closing. If you're working a 9 to 5, that does not mean that you're not doing what you're passionate about. Some passions are a 9 to 5. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that say, well, if you're working a 9 to 5, you're in a cube. No, that's misinformation too, or missing context. But it's find your why and then just start. Quit trying to put a grand scheme together, because you will analyze and talk yourself out of everything when you're trying to diagnose every wrong step that you could take. Just start, right?
Yeah, I think that's well said. And on the final thing here, I'll just show, this is your Twitter here. People interested in following, I highly suggest you guys follow him. He's on Twitter, and there's a link to his link tree here where you can find his work here. So if you could just, plug anything that you're working on, anything else that I haven't shared already.
Yeah, man. So we've got the Cigar Room, which is the guys group that I've put together. It's a membership-based group. We meet every Saturday at 9 a.m. It's via Zoom. The only thing that I ask for in your first meeting with the group of guys is give me your time. You like it, from there, we can talk about membership. But this is a group of guys like myself and Michael, Zach Small is in it, Anthony, Jerry, Minigrit. There's some great guys, Redmond, that are burning a path into becoming better men. And it's a group that, look, we go on, and through my week, I think, shit, if I'm not at the gym, Redmond's going to have something to say. And that's the kind of circle that I want around me. And so that's what we're doing there. Redmond and I are working on a men's trip called the Sassanke Men's Expeditions. It's going to be just a few hours outside of Johannesburg, starting October 12th through the 16th. This is a fucking mission that we are proud of. It is going to change lives in the sense that there's going to be curriculum. There are going to be physical, mental, and spiritual challenges. You will be immersed in what it means to be a man. You'll also be immersed in a third world country where you're going to learn about the different tribes, the different, histories through the apartheid, Nelson Mandela, and also in some of the most gorgeous places in the world. That's another thing that we've got moving. Back to the kind of the flagship, I've got Navigating the Intentional Life podcast. and the blog, which, you know, I've got some great podcasts coming up. Michael is going to be on. I've got Boyd Myers coming up, Caleb Gordon, and I know I'm missing one. Either way, there's some heavy hitters, some great dudes, fantastic stories that it'll make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. So I'm proud of what we do. I'm proud to be able to sit here and have this conversation with you, Michael. And I really, really appreciate what you're doing. And I really, really appreciate the fact that you brought me on. And so for those people that listen to him, man, subscribe and share this shit. Let your friends know. Women, if you're listening to this, let your husbands know, right? Grow together in this, right? Spread Michael's message so that he can continue to do his message. Rate it, review it, subscribe, and share.
Well, I appreciate that, Justin. Same to you, brother. And I'm looking forward to future conversations with you.
Yeah, man.